Hi guys, right now I'm at the Graduate Center. One of the things to be sustainable is to join activities that is related to sustainability. So tonight there is an event in this grad center, and I'm entering into the event. It starts at 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So as you can see, this is the hall. And soon we'll see what the event's about. This is the place, the Graduate Center. Hi, would you mind to say what is this event, the title of this event? I'm trying to record my daily sustainable activities, including joining events, beautiful events like this.
Oh, that's a great idea. You want to ask Peter up there? Because he's running the event. So that would be
okay.
great.
All right, thank
Great
you.
idea.
All right. Didn't record that. Hi, sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to be sustainable. Part of to be sustainable in the city is to joining beautiful events like tonight's events. Would you mind to remind everybody about this event for my recording?
Sure.
Yes. So you can talk about what's the title of this event and what is this about generally.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yep. If you don't mind, I'm going to film you. If not, then I can film the background. It's up to you.
Sure.
Yes.
Hi, so my name is Peter Christian Eigner. I'm the Deputy Director at the Gotham Center for New York City History at CUNY's Graduate Center. And tonight we have a panel discussing the question of whether New York City's future is sustainable, measuring the historical impact of growth and planning for more. Eric Sanderson, author of Mannahatta, A Natural History of New York City, is going to be talking about the history of the natural ecology of the city and how to incorporate that into future planning, along with Denise Hoffman-Brandt. Milton Mesa, the former Director of Sustainability in the Mayor's Office, will be joining, and Janet Babin of WNYC will be moderating.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for hosting this event.
Absolutely.
So let's see about how sustainable this meeting will be. This is how big it is. This is the back.
No, that thing isn't working right now. It's not working. I couldn't find what the connection is. Oh, so maybe we do want to shift it because we will have, several slides. Yeah. I mean, not alternative is to go, here, go that way.
So guys, not for judging, but as a meeting talk about is New York City future sustainable. As you can see on the top of that desk, is still using plastic bottles. Instead of having the speakers bring their own bottle, it's one-time use, recyclable plastic bottle. Not saying BPA free. So in that case, you may know the future sustainability in New York City has a long ways to go compared to California, because in California they already banned plastic bottles, especially those one-time use. Right, so this is a meeting I'm at right now, and it's gonna start at 6:30 and still early. We'll see how it goes.
And this moment is just another moment in time, but it's a very different moment in time in terms of its ecology and sustainability. This is sort of trying to imagine what Henry Hudson might have seen. an ecosystem of 54 different ecological communities and 1,000 different species, and a people, a Native American group, the Lenape, who've been here for, say, 1,000 years before Hudson showed up. This last of this whole series of cultures that are 8,000 years in the making of the New York City region. And I think what's important about this place we call Manhattan, which is where we get Manhattan from. The thing that's, I think, important about Manhattan in a sustainability context is it was a place that was in balance with its wider landscape, with the wider world. It was receiving inputs from outside and giving outputs to the outside, and those balances of inputs and outputs were such that the place could be conserved and sustained literally for thousands of years, and could adapt as the climate changed over tens of thousands of years. That's what's so important and what's so great about nature. Nature has this sustainability and this adaptability as a system of different species, all of which have their different needs and different requirements, and yet somehow manage to work together. The work has been I think, so important and so interesting that we've been expanding over the rest of the city, and this is an early image of what we think, if you could have flown a satellite over our fair city 400 years ago, it might have looked like. So all 5 boroughs of the city. We call this Waylikia. Waylikia is Lenape, which means my good home, and that's really the way we want people to think about the sustainability of the city going forward. As this is actually a really good place for people to live as well as for other species to live. But our development patterns haven't really leveraged that amazing capacity heretofore, and so that's what I really want to talk about in the next couple minutes, and I hope we can get into more in the panel. If you think about this sort of split screen image with Manhattan on one side and Manhattan on the other, and then what I want to say is that not only were the physical systems of the island so different, but so were the life ways and the ways of thinking of the people that were there. And that's really where we need to start and make progress in terms of sustainability. And you can just think about what was, this Lenape person thinking about Tishkohan, and how were his thoughts and his ways of living different than Peter Minuit on the other side. And this is a question I sort of wrestle with all the time, and I don't think one is necessarily better or worse than the other, but it's so fascinating to sort of contrast them. And this is the thing I want to try out, which is that one of the Native American ways of thinking about it is in a sort of multi-generational way. That when you think about the decisions you make about what you're doing today, you don't just think about what it means for yourself, but you think about it across generations. And the people just north of here, the Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois people as the French called them, they had this concept of 7 generations, thinking for 7 generations. You probably know the products, right? The 7th generation, toilet paper, or whatever.
We have to recognize that we are part of nature. Nature is us, and demonizing cities as being destructive is really just setting us back. So I'm going to be showing you a lot of propositions, designs, because that's what I do, I make designs. But through the designs, I explore how we need to start thinking about the city differently. And there will be things from City Sync, Waterproofing New York, and then just recently we did a symposium called Design Against Denial, which takes a more comprehensive socio-environmental look at urban systems. So if we take for granted that cities are human ecosystems, and they are, then we need to recognize that there are characteristics of ecosystems that we don't normally associate with cities, like interconnectivity, the fact that they're animated by disturbance, which is normative, and that they have many, many different time scales that all work at once and are in some ways synchronized or chaotic. You can see the diagram of carbon cycle disturbance, which has nested and contingent processes, is not the way we ordinarily think about order in the city. And there was an image of Ebenezer Howard's Garden City. So when I was doing City Sync, I had to come up with new ways of envisioning systems in the city. And one of the things that I did was I plotted, with a point distribution plot, the carbon stored in soil and the carbon stored in biomass. And that's what you see with the gridded map there. And then the diagrams on the left show the relationship of that there's more carbon stored in soil with stability than in biomass. So to remediate this, I came up with an adaptive and a set of infrastructures that is many, many different types of things, that distributes itself across the city in many different ways, and that actually latches onto the performance of other city systems, like the recreation infrastructure, parks, like stormwater management. And in order to do this, I had to come up with a strategy for opening up land use policies. And I used the idea of usufruct, which is the sort of beneficial common use of land without diminishing its value, as a way to imagine what I called ecological easements, which you could use in the Bronx to animate vacant lots, to have cycling biomass storage, or even economic investments for biotic growth. Or you could take somebody's yard in Glen Cove and put a bioswale there. Big infrastructure tends to come at high costs, and it tends to be pervasive and not surgical. So after Sandy, and looking at the issues of what the city is doing right now with green streets, with these tiny little slivers of green infrastructure that absorbs stormwater, that's great for an everyday storm, but for Staten Island, the coastal areas, where they get much more water, it's not going to do. So I started looking below the surface. And one of the things I'm always interested in is how we represent landscape. And the idea that we tend to represent happy, smiling people in parks and on lawn, when really there's so much life below ground that when I started drawing this cistern, which had to contain a lot of water and would really be of negligible impact on the surface, I imagined that its real strength and the power of it was below ground, and that that's what I had to represent. So this idea of layering, that we're thinking in depth and not just on the surface, translated back, in some ways stemmed from CitySync, where I looked at layered plantings, which don't have a sort of monoculture of lawns and trees or the ornamental plants, but you have a richness of plants which actually creates more biotic habitat for non-human species. It amplifies a lot of the performance as well as carbon storage, and it's not as leaky, because one of the problems we have is this idea of leakage, that there are...
At the mayor's office, I started the sustainability office at Columbia, which I did for about I guess it was 6 years or so. And so starting it from scratch, one of the things that I grappled with was, what does it mean to be in this tremendous urban environment, and try to figure out, what is a sustainable campus in the middle of this great city, but also what does sustainability mean in this urban area. And so some of the things that I noticed, and some of the things that occurred to me, were that, this is a city of hard edges, and it's a city that's all sort of angular and, geometric. And yet, you sort of look at the outside is very much like the inside. The sidewalks are relatively flat. The streets, minus the potholes, are, relatively flat. And so, but that's not what nature does. But if you look around, you still see nature coming up through the cracks in the sidewalks, through, moss on the side of a building. You see the raptors, you see peregrine falcons, native along the Hudson. And when I was up at Columbia, there were, quite regularly, I would see the red-tailed hawks sort of swooping down and grabbing rats, and pigeons, for that matter. So, which horrified many young children who were on campus and would watch that. But so it's there, and it's just that people don't necessarily see it because they're rushing and they're on the way. And I think that there's always been this kind of view that, nature is something of a luxury, and it's not really part of the city. It's something outside of the city. And so people go away in order to, get back to nature, to get away from the city. If you have a certain, income level, certain level of resources, you can do that. If you don't, you can't. And so, we've got these parks that are actually great, sort of ecosystems and connected to each other. So, again, when I was at Columbia, one of the things that I saw was we put in the first green roofs at the university while I was there. And the very first green roof went in right above my office in my building, which was an old sort of townhouse. And one of the things that what I tried to do is sort of make it idiot-proof. And so the rollout seat, and this was quite a few years ago before there was a whole lot of knowledge about green roofs and how they could work. So one of the things that I noticed was that within a few months, all of a sudden there were other plants that were coming up in what should have been the sort of uniform bed of So, not only that, not only were there other plants that were coming up that were not these things, but there were also lots of butterflies and dragonflies and other insects. And so then, I sort of gathered together several scientists there, and we sort of started talking about, well, what does this mean? What could we do here? And sort of put together a little research team and set up these kinds of measuring stations to figure out what green roofs really do.